in a working-class neighborhood in Georgia. A resilient black woman, despite drowning in debt, still carries a warm heart. She often helps those less fortunate and provides free meals to the homeless. And tonight, she helps a homeless man as usual, without knowing that he is not an ordinary drifter. The next day, he returns with his friends, bringing an offer that could change everything. Will she be able to save her diner, or will she be forced to close its doors? Before we dive into the story, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The neon sign above King's Table flickered weakly against the darkened Atlanta sky, its once bright glow barely cutting through the cold drizzle that draped over the city like a worn-out blanket. Inside, Lorraine Carter stood behind the counter, arms folded, eyes fixed on the stack of unpaid bills resting beside the register. The numbers swam before her, a cruel reminder of how much she owed: 3 months of back rent, past due invoices from suppliers. Even the electric company had sent another warning. She exhaled, the sound barely louder than the buzzing of the old refrigerator behind her. If she didn't come up with something soon, King's Table, the restaurant she had poured her soul into, would become another boarded-up storefront in a city that had forgotten its small businesses. The place wasn't what it used to be. 7 years ago, she had opened its doors with nothing but her late mother's recipes and a dream, a place where people could sit, share a meal, and feel at home. But now, the curtains were faded, the tile floors scuffed, and the customers fewer and fewer. She had already let go of most of her staff, keeping only 2 part-time workers to help during peak hours. The rest? She handled herself. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, making everything from scratch, just like Mama had taught her. The signature chicken and dumpling soup, the cornbread that had regulars licking their fingers, none of it was enough to keep the place afloat. Lorraine turned her gaze toward the clock. 9:45 p.m. Another slow night. The storm outside had driven most people indoors, and the few that had come in tonight had long since left. Her daughter, Malia, was at home with a neighbor, probably doing her homework at the kitchen table, oblivious to how bad things had gotten. Lorraine rubbed her temples. Malia needed new school supplies, new shoes for the winter, and God knew what else. She had considered selling Mama's necklace, the only thing of value she had left, but the thought of parting with it made her chest tighten. It was bad enough she had lost her husband to a heart attack when Malia was still a baby. Giving up her mother's last gift felt like letting go of something even deeper. A gust of wind rattled the door, and for a moment Lorraine thought it was just the storm playing tricks on her. Then the bell above the entrance gave a tired jingle. She looked up, half expecting a lost traveler, or maybe a drunk stumbling in from the rain. Instead, a man stood just beyond the threshold, hunched, his coat soaked through, water pooling beneath his feet. Lorraine's first instinct was to be cautious. A lone black woman closing up at night, she had learned early on that you don't just trust anyone who walks through your door, especially not in this neighborhood, especially not when you look the way she does. But something about the man made her pause. He was older, maybe in his 60s, his gray hair disheveled, his face lined with exhaustion. His eyes, however, were tired but kind. He hesitated before stepping forward, his shoes squelching against the tile. "Evening, ma'am," he said, voice hoarse, worn down like gravel underfoot. Lorraine nodded. "Evening. We're about to close." The man looked around, as if he were afraid of taking up too much space. He hesitated, gripping his hat in both hands. "I haven't eaten in a couple of days." His voice cracked at the admission, and immediately he looked away, ashamed. Lorraine's chest tightened. She had seen desperation before hell, she had lived it. When she first moved to Atlanta with nothing but a toddler on her hip and a few dollars in her pocket, she knew what it was like to go to bed hungry just so her child could eat. She knew the humiliation of asking for help and the sting of being turned away simply because of the color of her skin. "I don't have any money," the man added quickly, as if that would make things easier. "But if you got anything left, I'd be grateful." Lorraine glanced at the clock again. 9:48 p.m. She had already cleaned the stove, wiped down the counters, prepped everything for tomorrow. Logic told her to say no, to send him back into the storm. But her heart, the same heart that had made her hold on to this restaurant, despite everything, wouldn't let her. She sighed, shaking her head. "Take a seat," she said, nodding toward a corner booth. "I'll fix you something." The man blinked, surprised. I don't want to trouble you." "It ain't trouble," she said, already moving toward the kitchen. "Besides, I ain't gonna let a man sit in my restaurant and starve." He hesitated before giving her a grateful nod. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely above the rain tapping against the window. Lorraine got to work, reknitting the burner and pulling out what she had left from the night, chicken and dumpling soup. The same recipe Mama used to make on Sundays, back when food was scarce, but love was plenty. She ladled it into a deep bowl, adding extra dumplings, extra broth. Then she sliced up a piece of cornbread, still warm from the oven, and placed it on the side. While she worked, she thought about the landlord, a man named Ray Whitmore, who had come in last week with his thin lips pressed into a smirk as he reminded her she was on borrowed time. "You people don't know how to run businesses," he had said, leaning against the counter like he owned the place, which, technically, he did. "I'll give you another 30 days, then I'm selling this place to someone who can actually turn a profit." You people. The words had stung, but Lorraine had swallowed her pride, like she always did, and nodded, biting her tongue. That was the way of things. They let you play the game, but they never let you win. She pushed the thought aside as she placed the plate in front of her guest. "Here you go," she said. "Eat up." The man looked at the food like it was something sacred. He picked up the spoon, his hands shaking slightly, and took the first bite. Almost instantly his shoulders relaxed, a long breath escaping him. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the warmth, the taste, the memory it carried. When he opened them again, there was a tear clinging to his lashes. "This," he said, voice thick, "this tastes like home." Lorraine swallowed hard. "Yeah," she murmured. "I know the feeling." For the next few minutes, she let him eat in peace. She busied herself wiping down the counter again, pretending not to notice the way he kept stealing glances at her, as if trying to find the right words. Finally, when the bowl was nearly empty, he set his spoon down and cleared his throat. "My name's Elliot Grayson," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "I used to be someone once." He chuckled, but it was a hollow sound, the kind that came from a man who had lost everything. An accountant. Worked for a big firm. But then, things happened. He shook his head, looking out at the rain. "Lost my job. Lost my wife. Lost my home. Been trying to find my way back ever since." Lorraine sat down across from him, nodding. "I get it," she said simply. Elliot studied her for a long moment, then reached into his coat pocket. Lorraine expected him to pull out a few crumpled bills, maybe a handful of change. Instead, he placed a single slip of paper on the table and slid it toward her. She picked it up. It was a receipt, but completely blank, except for a handwritten note at the bottom. "I don't have money to pay for this meal," it read, "but let me come back tomorrow." Lorraine frowned, glancing up at him. "What does that mean?" Elliot simply smiled. "You'll see." And with that he stood, nodded in thanks, and stepped back out into the rain. The next morning, Lorraine arrived at King's table earlier than usual. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a damp chill that clung to the air. She flipped the sign to open, adjusted her apron, and glanced at the empty tables, the silence pressing in around her. Elliot Grayson. The name lingered in her mind, along with the receipt he had left behind blank, except for those cryptic words. "Let me come back tomorrow." She wasn't sure why she had held on to it. Maybe because something about the man had felt different. Maybe because, despite all the years of disappointments, she still wanted to believe in something good. Or maybe she just didn't want to admit that she had served him a free meal, knowing full well that she was the one drowning, not him. By lunchtime, the usual flow of customers trickled in, regulars who had come for their cornbread and collard greens, truck drivers passing through, a group of construction workers from the next block. She greeted them all with a tired but genuine smile, pushing aside the unease in her chest. Every time the door opened, she found herself half expecting Elliot to walk in, but he didn't. Then, just past noon, the door swung open again, and this time it wasn't just Elliot. He wasn't alone. Lorraine froze, a dish towel still clutched in her hands. Elliot walked in first, looking almost unrecognizable. He was no longer in the tattered coat from the night before. Instead, he wore a clean button-down, his posture straighter, more assured. But it wasn't just him. 3 men followed behind him. tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark suits that spoke of money, power, and something Lorraine had learned to be wary of. She instinctively tensed, her grip tightening around the towel. She knew men like this. Men with easy smiles and expensive watches who walked into places like hers not to eat but to buy. Elliot approached the counter, his voice warm but steady. "Morning, Lorraine." She nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "Morning." Then, she cut to the chase. "What's this about?" Elliot gestured toward the men behind him. "These are my colleagues. Friends. People who want to talk to you." Lorraine's stomach twisted. She had heard that before. One of the men, a middle-aged white man with slick-back hair and a practiced smile, stepped forward. James Wycliffe. That name meant something. It took her a second, but then she placed it. He owned half the restaurant chains downtown, the kind of places that put diners like hers out of business. He extended a hand. She didn't take it. His smile didn't waver. "Miss Carter, I've heard a lot about you. About this place." He glanced around, his eyes scanning every worn-out detail, the faded menus, the chipped paint on the walls, the scuff marks on the tile. "It has character." Lorraine folded her arms. "It has history." "Of course." He nodded, as if they were on the same page. "And it has potential." There it was. That word. Potential. She knew what came next. An offer. A deal. A way out that didn't look like a way out until it was too late. Elliot stepped in before she could reply. "James and the others aren't here to take anything from you, Lorraine. They're here to help." She scoffed. "That right?" James chuckled lightly, as if she had made a joke. "Look, I'll be honest. We invest in businesses we believe in, and from what Elliot tells me, you've built something special here. Something worth saving." Her jaw tightened. "Saving?" Elliot met her gaze. "I told you I'd be back." He gestured toward the men. "And I told you I used to be someone. What I didn't tell you is that I still have people who listen to me. People who trust my judgment. When you gave me that meal last night, Lorraine, you weren't just feeding some broke old man. You were feeding someone who knows exactly what it takes to make a restaurant succeed." Lorraine wanted to believe him, but she had learned long ago that belief didn't pay the rent. James reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek folder, thick with documents. He placed it on the counter and slid it toward her. "We want to invest in King's Table. Not buy it. Not change it. Invest. Expand. Make sure it doesn't become another forgotten storefront in a city that's already lost too many." Lorraine didn't touch the folder. Instead, she looked at Elliot. "And what's in it for you?" His expression softened. "You treated me like a human being when you had every reason not to." He nodded toward the folder. "Now let me return the favor." For a long moment, she said nothing. Just stood there, the weight of a lifetime of disappointments pressing down on her. But then, the bell above the door jingled, and a familiar voice broke the silence. "Well, ain't this a sight?" Lorraine turned, and there he was. Ray Whitmore. He stood just inside the door, arms crossed, his smirk settling onto his face like it belonged there. He was dressed as he always was, too casual slacks, a button down a little too tight around his stomach, and the kind of smug confidence that only came from knowing the system was built to serve men like him. "Afternoon, Carter," he drawled, his gaze flicking from her to the men in suits. "Didn't realize you were in the market for buyers." "We're not," Lorraine shot back. Ray lifted a brow. "That's so." He let his gaze linger on James, then Elliot. "Because last I checked, you were 3 months behind on rent. And this building, it's mine." A slow, sinking feeling settled into Lorraine's gut. This was bad. James looked between them, clearly sensing the shift in tone. "Who is this?" Ray smirked. "The man who actually owns this place." James frowned, glancing at Lorraine. "You didn't mention." "She didn't have to," Ray cut in smoothly. "See, I've been real patient with Carter here. Gave her extra time, let her slide on a payment or two." He shook his head, clucking his tongue. "But patience only goes so far." Lorraine clenched her fists. This was exactly why she had hesitated, why she had never trusted men in suits, whether they came with contracts or eviction notices. They were all the same. Ray turned to James, all fake politeness. Now, I don't know what kind of deal you're trying to cook up here, but it don't really matter, does it? Because in exactly 27 days, if I don't have every cent she owes me, this place is mine. Silence settled over the room like a heavy fog. Ray tipped an imaginary hat toward Lorraine. Good luck, Carter. Then, just like that, he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. For the first time since Elliot had walked in, Lorraine felt something worse than suspicion. She felt hope slipping through her fingers. Lorraine stood frozen behind the counter, the echo of Ray Whitmore's smug farewell still clinging to the air. 27 days. That was all she had before King's table was ripped from her hands. It wasn't just the money, it was the humiliation. The way he had strutted in like he already owned the place. The way he had spoken over her, dismissed her, made it clear that in his eyes she was nothing more than a tenant on borrowed time, a black woman who had the audacity to think she could build something permanent. She clenched her fists, her nails pressing into her palms as James Wycliffe exhaled sharply, adjusting the cuff of his pristine suit. This complicates things. Lorraine snapped her gaze to him. Complicates? Her voice was sharp, laced with something bitter. I think complicates is a real polite way to say you just wasted my damn time. Elliot stepped forward, hands raised in a calming gesture. Lorraine, hold on. No, she cut him off, turning to face him fully. I don't know what game you think you're playing, Elliot, bringing these men in here, throwing around words like investment and potential, but let's get one thing straight. She jabbed a finger toward the door where Ray had exited. That man. He's the only one who gets a say in whether or not I keep this place. And unless you've got a plan that involves cutting me a check right now for every cent I owe, I don't see how this conversation matters anymore. Silence settled heavy between them. The restaurant was still open, but the handful of customers left had gone quiet, their eyes darting between Lorraine and the group of businessmen in suits. James Wycliffe exhaled, rubbing his temple like he was suddenly regretting this entire thing. I don't invest in businesses with unstable leases. That's just bad business. Lorraine let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. Of course you don't. Elliot's voice was steady when he spoke. James, wait. There's a way around this. James sighed, clearly annoyed. I don't buy real estate, Elliot. You wouldn't have to, Elliot pressed, eyes locked on Lorraine's. We pay off what she owes, settle things with the landlord, and then we move forward with the investment. Clean slate. Lorraine hated the way those words tasted in her mouth. Pay off what she owed. Like she was some charity case, waiting to be bailed out by men in expensive suits who didn't know a damn thing about what it had taken to survive in this industry. James folded his arms. And who's putting up the money for that? You. Elliot didn't blink. Yes. The room went still. Lorraine's breath caught, her stomach twisting at the weight of what had just been said. James looked genuinely taken aback before shaking his head with a humorless chuckle. Jesus, Elliot, you're really committing to this, huh? Elliot just nodded. I know a good thing when I see it. James studied him for a long moment before finally shrugging. Fine. If you want to put your money on the line, that's your call. But I'm not signing anything until I see proof that this restaurant can grow. Sentiment doesn't turn a profit. Lorraine should have been relieved. Instead, all she felt was fury bubbling up in her chest. She turned to Elliot, stepping closer, her voice low enough that only he could hear. What the hell do you think you're doing? He met her gaze, unwavering. What I said I would. She narrowed her eyes. I don't need a savior. His lips pressed into a firm line. And I'm not trying to be one. I'm making an investment. You think this is charity? Lorraine, I watched you last night. You run this place like it's a part of you. The way you cook, the way you treat your customers, the way you fight for this place like it's more than just a restaurant. He shook his head. That's the kind of business I believe in. Lorraine's throat tightened, but she refused to let it show. She wanted to argue, to tell him that she didn't need his money, that she could figure it out on her own. But the truth was, she was out of options. James, apparently bored of the emotional back and forth, clapped his hands together. So, what's the plan then? Because if we're doing this, I want to see numbers. I want to see sales go up. Customer engagement. Prove to me that this isn't a dead investment. Lorraine bristled. She didn't need to prove a damn thing to this man. Elliot spoke before she could. "Give us 2 weeks." James lifted a brow. "That fast?" "Give us 2 weeks," Elliot repeated. "Let me help her restructure, boost outreach, cut unnecessary costs. If we can show real growth in that time, you agree to move forward with the investment." James tilted his head, considering. Then he smirked. "Fine. 2 weeks. But if the numbers aren't there, I walk." Lorraine clenched her jaw. She didn't like this. Any of it. But she knew the alternative. Ray Whitmore holding an eviction notice. Her restaurant, her mother's legacy, reduced to nothing but an empty shell, waiting to be taken over by the next gentrified coffee shop. She exhaled sharply, looking Elliot dead in the eye. 2 weeks, she repeated. "And if this fails, you don't try to help me again." He held her gaze. "Deal." James, apparently satisfied, nodded once before stepping back. "Well then, looks like you two have some work to do." Lorraine felt the weight of what she had just agreed to settle heavy on her shoulders. 2 weeks to turn this place around. 2 weeks to fight for something that felt like it had already been slipping through her fingers. And the worst part. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure if she was fighting alone. The next morning, Lorraine stood in the middle of King's table, arms crossed, staring at the scuffed floors, the faded paint on the walls, the handwritten menu board that hadn't been updated in years. This was home. But for the first time, she saw it the way they did Elliot, James, the suits. The ones who had walked in and seen potential, but also weakness. She hated that they weren't wrong. Elliot arrived just before opening, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp with determination. He had a notebook in one hand and 2 cups of coffee in the other. He handed her one without a word. She took it begrudgingly. "If this is how you plan to win me over, you should know it takes more than caffeine." He smirked. "I figured, but it's a start." He opened his notebook, flipping to a page already filled with numbers, charts, plans. "All right, here's what we need to do. First, we're cutting costs. I took a look at your supply orders. You're overpaying for ingredients from vendors who are price gouging you." Lorraine bristled. "I've been using the same suppliers for years." "And they've been robbing you for years," Elliot countered, tapping his pen against the paper. "I made a few calls last night. I can get you better deals, fresher ingredients, and lower prices." Lorraine narrowed her eyes. "And what's in it for them?" He shrugged. "Long-term business. You grow, they grow. Simple economics." She exhaled slowly. She didn't like that he had already made calls, already stepped into her world without asking, but she couldn't argue with the logic. She gestured for him to continue. "Marketing," he went on. "Right now, this place relies on foot traffic and regulars. That's not enough. We need online presence, customer engagement, social media." Lorraine groaned. "I barely have time to breathe, let alone tweet about cornbread." Elliot grinned. "That's why I hired someone." She blinked. "You what?" The door swung open before he could answer, and a young woman stepped inside, carrying a laptop and an energy Lorraine immediately disliked. "Jada Brooks, digital marketing." She grinned, holding out a hand. "I'm here to save you from obscurity." Lorraine looked at Elliot, then back at Jada, ignoring her outstretched hand. "You're joking." Jada smirked, unfazed. "Nope. I've already set up an Instagram, a Facebook page, and a TikTok. We're going to turn this place into the hottest soul food spot in Atlanta." Lorraine let out a slow breath, willing herself not to snap. "I agreed to 2 weeks of changes, Elliot. Not an invasion." Elliot held up his hands. "Look, I know this feels fast, but trust me. This is how you compete. The food speaks for itself, but people need to find you first." Lorraine set her coffee down, gripping the edge of the counter. This was moving too fast. Yesterday she had been barely holding on, and today her restaurant was being dissected like a failing corporation. But then a thought hit her. Ray Whitmore. The eviction notice. 27 days. She had no room for pride right now. She sighed. "Fine, but if this girl gets in my way, she's out." Jada just winked. "Don't worry, Ms. Carter. You'll love me by the end of this." Elliot clapped his hands. "Great. Now, for the last part, the menu." Lorraine's head snapped up. "The menu is fine. He nodded. It's great. But it's also too big. We need to trim it down, focus on what sells best. She folded her arms. Every dish on that menu has history. My mother's history. My history. Elliot softened. I know. And I'm not asking you to erase that. I'm asking you to make it stronger. Feature the dishes people keep coming back for. Make them the heart of the restaurant. Lorraine hesitated. This was hers. Her mother's recipes, the flavors that made this place feel like home. But she also knew Elliot was right. She knew what dishes always sold out, what people asked for most. Fine, she muttered. But I make the final call. Elliot grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. For the rest of the day, King's Table became a war room. Elliot negotiated with vendors, slashing costs and securing better supplies. Jada set up a professional photo shoot, capturing plates of fried chicken and collard greens in a way that made them look almost too perfect to eat. Lorraine tested new variations of her best dishes, tweaking seasoning, plating, presentation. By the end of the day, they had built something she didn't quite recognize her restaurant, but better. And then, just as things felt like they were finally turning, the first blow came. Jada's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and her face darkened. What is it? Lorraine asked, already bracing herself. Jada turned the phone toward them. On the screen was a post from Ray Whitmore. Sad to see yet another struggling business trying to survive on handouts. King's Table mismanaged, failing, and now begging for help from outsiders. You hate to see it. Lorraine's stomach dropped. She snatched the phone, scrolling through the flood of comments. Some were from people defending the restaurant, but most were mocking, dismissing, tearing her down before she even had a chance to stand. Soul food joints pop up and die every year. Nothing new. Gentrification's about to eat this place alive. She should just sell while she still can. Lorraine's fingers trembled around the phone. She had known Ray would play dirty. But seeing her life reduced to nothing more than a public joke, it made her feel like she was drowning all over again. Elliot's jaw clenched as he read over her shoulder. We can fight this. Lorraine exhaled, steadying herself. No, not like this. She looked at Jada. Can you flip this? Jada's lips curled into a slow, wicked smile. Oh, absolutely. Lorraine nodded, setting the phone down. Fine. He wanted a fight. She'd give him one. Jada's fingers moved fast across her phone screen, her expression sharpened with focus. Lorraine watched as she pulled up the King's Table social media pages, already typing, her brain moving 3 steps ahead of the situation. The rage simmering beneath Lorraine's skin was still there, still hot and heavy, but she forced herself to take a slow breath, to think instead of just react. Ray Whitmore had made his move. Now it was her turn. Jada's voice was quick, decisive. First, we don't engage with his post directly. That's what he wants, a fight on his turf. We flip the narrative. She tapped a few more times, then turned her screen toward Lorraine and Elliot. Check this out. Lorraine scanned the post. It was simple, but sharp, cutting through the noise like a knife. Mismanaged. Failing. Let's talk facts. King's Table has been serving Atlanta for 7 years. We don't beg, we hustle. We grind. And we sure as hell don't let folks who've never stepped foot in our doors define us. Come taste what a real legacy looks like. We feed the city King's Table ATL. Lorraine blinked. That's not bad. Jada smirked. Oh, honey, that's just the beginning. She was already moving, grabbing Elliot's notebook, flipping to a blank page. We're turning this into a story. People love an underdog. They love a fighter. We give them a reason to root for us, and trust me, by the time I'm done, Ray Whitmore is gonna wish he kept our name out of his damn mouth. Lorraine folded her arms. You're really enjoying this, huh? Jada grinned. Girl, this is what I do. Elliot chuckled under his breath, but Lorraine could see the tension in his jaw. He was thinking about the same thing she was. This wasn't just about online perception. This was about survival. Jada's fingers flew across her phone as she rattled off instructions. We need customer engagement. Real stories. I'll post a call out asking people to share their favorite memories of King's Table. People love nostalgia, makes them feel connected. We highlight longtime customers, show what this place means to them. Get the community behind us. Elliot nodded. I'll handle outreach. I know people in the industry, food bloggers, local influencers. We get them in here, get them talking. If we create enough buzz, Ray's smear campaign won't matter. Lorraine hesitated. I don't want this to feel like we're begging. Jada looked at her, eyes serious now. This ain't begging, Ms. Carter. This is taking back control of the narrative. You built something real here. Now we remind people why it matters. Something in Lorraine's chest tightened. It did matter. Not just to her, not just to Malia, but to the people who walked through those doors every day. The customers who had come in when she first opened, who had watched Malia grow up, who had treated this place like home. Fine, she said. Let's do it. Jada grinned. That's what I'm talking about. Within an hour, King's Table's social media was alive. Customers flooded the comments, sharing photos of birthday dinners, first dates, Sunday lunches with their grandmothers. Stories poured in about how Lorraine had once given a struggling mother a free meal, about how a retired man came in every Friday for cornbread because it reminded him of his wife. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was a piece of them. And then, something unexpected happened. Other restaurants started chiming in. A well-known soul food spot downtown posted, King's Table is part of the heartbeat of Atlanta. Ray Whitmore's got nothing on real Southern cooking. We feed the city. Another, a black-owned barbecue joint, wrote, Real recognizes real. King's Table stays. Lorraine stared at the screen, stunned. I didn't expect this. Jada smirked. Community, baby. Something Ray will never have. Elliot leaned against the counter, scanning the numbers. Engagements up 400%. People are paying attention. And just as those words left his mouth, the door swung open hard enough to make the bell above it rattle. Ray Whitmore. His face was flushed, his jaw tight, his usual smug smirk nowhere to be found. He marched straight up to the counter, planting his hands on the wood with a force that made the salt and pepper shakers tremble. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was low, controlled, but Lorraine could hear the crack of real anger underneath. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Running my restaurant. Ray let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. I don't know who you think you're fooling with this little circus act, but it won't change a damn thing. Your rent is still past due. You still owe me every dime. And no amount of internet pity is going to save you from that. Lorraine's hands curled into fists at her sides. This man thought he had already won. Elliot straightened beside her, his voice dangerously even. What do you want, Ray? Ray's eyes flicked to him, finally registering that Elliot wasn't just some bystander. His expression shifted, calculation creeping in. You. I know your type. Rich white boy with a savior complex. Think you can come in here, throw some cash around, and fix everything. But let me tell you something. He leaned in, his voice dropping. This ain't your world. You don't win here. Elliot's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Lorraine stepped forward. I think we're done here, Ray. His eyes snapped back to hers. Excuse me? You heard me. She folded her arms. I'm done listening to you talk like I don't belong here. Like this place ain't worth fighting for. You don't own me, and you damn sure don't get to decide my future. Ray's nostrils flared. You're still on my property, Carter. Lorraine took a slow breath, her voice cool as steel. Not for long. Ray's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Jada let out a loud, dramatic gasp from behind the counter. Oh, would you look at that, she said, holding up her phone. Someone just leaked our little conversation. Guess who's about to be all over the news? Ray's face drained of color. You wouldn't. Jada raised an eyebrow. Oh, honey, I already did. Ray spun on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the bell nearly fell off. The second he was gone, the entire restaurant burst into applause. Lorraine exhaled sharply, pressing a hand to her chest as the adrenaline surged through her. Elliot turned to her, grinning despite himself. Well, that was satisfying. Lorraine let out a breathless laugh. Damn right it was. Jada grinned. Now, let's make sure we finish this fight. And just like that, King's Table wasn't just surviving anymore. it was winning. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.